What if World War II was just the German War? Part 1. I don't know any good way to start this, so just deal with it. The scenario. In this timeline, three major things happen that didn't happen in our timeline. 1. Japan never invaded China in the 1930s and 1940s. 2. Benito Mussolini doesn't become a German ally and instead stays loyal to the Allies like it did for most of the 1930s. 3. When Germany invades the Sudetenland in 1938, a coalition of the USSR, Poland, Britain, Italy, France and Czechoslovakia invade Germany from all directions. The peace treaty and the revolution. The Reich would most likely the war, but it won't be punished as severely as it was in our timeline. They probably will just lose East Prussia and some stuff to Czechoslovakia, and Austria gets independence, but it won't get split up and occupies like in our timeline. It will have to pay some reparations but not as much as it did in our timeline. However, this would be a major humiliation for the Nazi state. Because the Nazi have not only failed to reverse the humiliation of the First World War but have lost another major war and thus lost more land. Shortly after the surrender we could see huge army rebellions and civilian riots and uprisings which would lead to the overthrow of Adolf Hitler and the establishment of a new order in Germany. However, there is a problem. What is the new order? I mean, it could be Weimar Loyalist revolution with the re-establishment of a German republic, it could be a communist one with the establishment of the Socialist Republic of Germany, or it could be a breakaway wing of the Nazi Party supported by the Weimar Act. It is impossible for me to predict what would happen, so this is going to be a three-parter. In this video, we'll talk about what would happen if a breakaway Nazi Party win and the one which succeeds. I will cover the other possibilities in other videos. The New Reich. It is hard to predict what the beliefs of the breakaway Nazi wing would be. It could range from simply extreme German nationalism and conservatism that might not considered fascism by us today to just Nazis but they hate Hitler, but I think the second one is more likely by 0.000000009%. The new Nazi state would probably just try the same tactics as Hitler but rebrand them. Apart from being very totalitarian and brutal, they will be aggressive and unscientific, like the old Nazi state. They would have hostile relations with the Allies, and might invade Austria or something later on. But this Nazi state would be much more unstable because it probably won't have a leader to rally under. Riots and mutinies would be commonplace. The government would probably change every 8 seconds but all of them would have the same ideology. However, the world would probably not care about Germany anymore. We probably won't see the communist world and capitalist world become friends because Germany is not strong enough to be any actual threat. And this would go on for a decade, probably. Because it's inevitable that Germany sides with Britain, France, Italy and the US against the USSR. World War II in this timeline wouldn't be fascism versus everybody else, but communism versus capitalism. After joining Western Bloc, Germany might start stabilizing and by 1948 it might be comparable to Italy and France. I could also see Germany start shedding off its Nazi skin and start becoming nothing more than an authoritarian right-wing state, turning more like 1970s or 80s Chile. Yes, like Pinochet's Chile, it would be oppressive and brutal and inhumane, and since Germany is bigger than Chile it might kill as many people as the Nazi regime, but it can't be considered Nazi. They might also stop having their kill the Jews, kill the Slavs and kill the Roma fetish. They could probably pay off the debt unlike in the First World War. The country might stay this way until the 60s or 70s until it starts becoming more like Britain and France, be it due to war or protest, but it probably won't be bloodless. The alternate Cold War. The Cold War in this timeline would be a lot like the Cold War in our timeline, but it would have many differences. 1. The Eastern Bloc would be a lot smaller. 2. Germany would be united but under the new fascist Reich. 3. The USA won't be the leader of the Western Bloc, it will have no definitive leader. 4. Even though most major colonies would get independence, a lot of them might never achieve it until the 2000s. 5. The Japanese Empire still exists, but it doesn't invade China or Indonesia or anything. 6. Nazism is accepted in the West. We might see a few Nazi presidents in the U.S. 7. Satyagraha would fail because the British state still wants to keep India, and what would happen is a Soviet-backed rebellion. Same in most other colonies. 8. Your mom. The Soviets might back lots of anti-colonial rebels in Asia and Africa. They might also get into war with Poland every 6 seconds. The Cold War will probably devolve into World War II, but that's later. For now we can frame some conflicts that might happen between the German War and World War II. The Indian insurgency. Gandhi's Satyagraha methods fail, and the Indian National Congress kicks him out and replaces him with a more militant leader who immediately starts a huge violent insurgency against the Raj with support from the USSR backed by mutinies in the Indian Army. The British respond by brutally massacring civilians. Thousands casualties on both sides. Thousands will die on both sides. The Indians would get supplies from the USSR. More people dead and injured. I am not sure who would win, but the Indians definitely have a better chance than they did in 1857 because of Soviet support. Let's say it's just a stalemate and some parts of India gain independence but some are kept by the British. Korean insurgency. A bunch of Korean communists under Kim Il-sung attempt to overthrow the Japanese colonial government in their homeland. The Red Army crosses in from outer Manchuria on the side of the insurgents, and they are ultimately successful, gaining the entire peninsula for themselves. Second Polish-Soviet War. The Poles and Soviets and Poles would probably fight a war between the 1938 and World War II, it's inevitable. This could start with some border clashes escalating into a war. The Soviets advance a bit in the east, but then Germany intervenes on Poland's side and they win. Chinese Civil War. Our timeline: China became communist, but it was only because the Soviets gave them all of Manchuria. Without it the CCP would have been annihilated and destroyed by the KMT. In this timeline that would be the case. The KMT, maybe with help from the Japanese, would be able to destroy the communist forces and consolidate power over most of China. However, this China would be an authoritarian state much like Mao's China and might kill just as many people, but it's 1. Capitalist. 2. And under Chiang Kai-shek. There might be a lot of other alternate wars in this timeline before World War II starts, but these are the ones that come into my head. The alternate World War II. World War II in this timeline is not between the Axis and Allies but between the Western and Eastern Bloc. It would probably happen during the 60s and 70s. This could begin in many places. It could start as a Japanese attempt to retake Korea. It could start as a war between the Indian Republic and Britain. It could be a second communist insurgency in China. It could be a war between the USSR and Mongolia and some other Eastern European nation. It's impossible to determine. But let's just say it was a second communist insurgency in China. Japan intervenes on the side of the Chinese government and the USSR, Mongolia and Korea intervene on the side of the rebels. After that the British, French, Americans and Dutch intervene on the side of the Chinese government. After that the war comes to Europe and Germany, Poland, Romania, Yugoslavia, Bulgaria, Czechoslovakia and Finland all declare war on the USSR. Some other countries join et voila, World War. The Eastern Bloc will win if they can successfully provoke communist revolution in the Western Bloc countries, while the Western Bloc will win if they can successfully avoid that. This is where the scenario splits again, and I am just going to end it here and let you decide what happens.